welcome back to Race Report, Nash Vegas edition.
Starting off this week's episode, we're going to talk about IndyCar, the final race of the season in Nashville. Lauren and Caley were actually there this past weekend to check out the final race while I was having severe FOMO in New York City, packing up and moving out of my apartment.
Yes, so we both on Friday drove to Nashville. Caley and I live on opposite sides of Tennessee, so it was like a perfect little meeting point for us in the middle. And we, the Track Talk girls were putting on a live event in Nashville that night, and we thought that we weren't going to be able to make it. And so like we had messaged like them, we're like, oh my gosh, like we really want to come, like we want to meet everyone, but we don't think we're going to make it. And then as I was driving, the more and more I was thinking like we really need to like go to this. Like this would be a good thing to go to and like meet people, because I mean where we live, like none of these, like there's not other motorsport girlies, and you know we want to try and like grow our connections, and our friends are like, hey, we should go. So we literally both drove straight to the event space, and I found a 7-Eleven right by the like event space and changed my clothes and did my makeup in the parking lot, because I was like, we have got to get to this. And then Caley, you can.
I was not so fortunate. I got out a little bit later than I planned, and we were still making it. So like the meet and greet portion of the event started at 6, and then like the actual filming, podcast, questionnaire panel started at 7. So I was still projected to get there at like 6:38, 6:40. So I was like, okay, well, like I don't have time to stop at a gas station. I will just change in the parking lot. And mind you, I had like my, like they were clean, but they have stains all over them from like work and the seasonings when I have to go on the floor. So like they had stains all over it. I smelled a little bit like Pringles. I had like no makeup on. So when I tell you that I was doing mascara on the interstate at 87, I might have been. And then I quite literally had to change my car, and then I brushed my teeth in the parking lot right before we went in and called it good to go. And we showed up with smiles on our face and bells on our toes, and it was all good.
Yeah, it was a super cool like event space, an event, just a bunch of, I mean, there were some guys, but it was like mostly all girls, and a couple people I had followed on Instagram or recognized from TikTok. So it was cool like seeing everyone. And Hannah and Emma did like a live show with a panel. So they had Josh from Barista Josh Racing, and then Zoe E Racing, and then Jordan, I forget her last name, but she does like marketing and stuff for motorsports on, and then she has like an Instagram that's pretty big. And so it was like a very cool panel of people from all different aspects of motorsport talking about their experiences. So I very much thoroughly enjoyed the event.
Good. And it was nice to sort of meet in person people that you interact with online, and getting to make like those in-person connections and seeing everybody's personality like in the flesh rather than just through the phone screen or, you know, through video clips, through podcast episodes. So everyone was super sweet, great coffee, loved it. And just, it was really nice to kind of have that sense of community that Lauren kind of was speaking to. We don't really have out here. And then on to what we really came for, which was the NASCAR race. Very sad that
IndyCar race.
Oh yeah, IndyCar race. My bad. Let's roll that back.
It was at the NASCAR track, so.
Was at the NASCAR
I'll give you
track. That's what got me all mixed up. So what we really came for, you know, the podcast was a great fun bonus, but the IndyCar race, sad that it's, you know, final season over, boo. But we were kind of touch and go, because Lauren and I were discussing like, do we need to bring rain boots? Do we need to bring ponchos? Because it was like 70% chance of rain. I think at one point.
A hurricane was supposed to come through.
Yeah.
Thankfully that didn't happen.
Yeah, I know. Thankful for everyone, but especially for us this weekend. So that was nice. I did bring my rain boots just in case, because it's like, after being caught out in the torrential downpour at the Indy 500, I will not be caught unaware again. I hope to never experience that thoroughly wetness, like soaked every inch of clothing, including my socks and my boots. I never want to experience that again. So it's like, Lauren, you bring the ponchos, I'll bring the rain boots, and we'll be set. Thankfully, neither of those things had to be used, so we were all good. But the little bit downside, I will say, of the race this year, and then I think for the next year, at least I'm not sure what they plan from 2 years from now, is that the track, it's the Nashville race, but it's not in Nashville. It is 40 minutes away in Lebanon at the Nashville Super Speedway, which is used by NASCAR a lot. It's an oval track, which is different than the normally planned street track. But because of the Titan Stadium construction, all of that had to be relocated to Lebanon. But Saturday, we were kind of debating whether or not we were going to go and like watch quali and stuff. And it was really kind of dependent on the weather. And when we got up, we watched race, which we'll get into later. But Lauren and I were like,
or F1 quali.
Yeah, F1 quali, my bad.
Saturday, yeah. No,
and we were like, oh, maybe not. We'll kind of just have a chill day. Saturday night, Lauren and I are like, we're going to have like a chill night and we're not going to like stress about going out. Like we just want to be mentally prepared for the race on Sunday. Like we want to be well rested so that we can actually appreciate. I have a habit of when I don't get enough sleep, it's something about the car noises like lulls me to sleep. I have
she fell
accidentally
fast asleep at Barber this year.
fallen
Fast asleep in her chair.
Straight up in my chair. Saturday night, we were like, that's not going to happen to us. We're not going to let Caley fall asleep. So we'll have a chill night in. So Lauren and I are like, we're going to have our own Clem's wine corner. And she brought a nice little bottle of wine.
I bought a bottle of red wine because I was like, Caley's my only friend that I know that drinks red wine. And then Caley and I collectively, joint effortly broke the cork in the wine bottle. So we got half of it out and half of it had to go in the bottle. And we're like, dang it, how are we going to drink it? Because it was a nice bottle of wine.
Yeah,
so,
it was an upgrade from the Kroger bottle that, I usually purchase.
And so I found a coffee filter and we had to coffee filter our wine. So that was really professional of us. And then we propped up my phone and watched the most recent episode of Off Track with Hinch and Rossi and ate pub mix.
I just ate the sesame sticks.
Yeah.
Lauren very kindly let me eat all those out of them because those are my favorite. And then we went to bed and it was great.
Yeah.
Now
it was.
On to Sunday, the real showstopper. So Lauren and I get ready. We get up, get ready to go. And we have friends who live in Nashville who very kindly let us stay at their place. So we didn't have to, go through the outrageous pricing of staying in a hotel or an Airbnb or all that stuff. So we stayed there, which allowed us to kind of have a little bit more freedom. And we head to the track around, I would say about 2 hours before the green flag. There was still plenty of GA parking when we got there. Like I thought we were kind of maybe going to have to pay for parking. No, there was plenty of GA parking. So we didn't pay for parking.
I'm glad we didn't buy advanced parking.
It's parking. No, it's not worth it. Just do GA. It's not that far of a walk. We were maybe 100 feet from like the preferred parking, and then that was 50 feet from the Coliseum. So just walk. It's okay. Wear shoes that you are okay with walking and standing in for a while, and you'll be good. So we got there and we went on a little bit of adventure. So we couldn't quite figure out how, because we had paddock passes so that we could go and see the garages and blah, 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 do that kind of stuff. We couldn't quite figure out how to get there. So we did end up walking probably the entire length multiple times. We walked all the way down to the end and was like, so this is just hospitality stuff for the teams. There's no way to get to, we also belatedly found out the tunnel to get to the paddock is only a car tunnel, not a people tunnel. So that might have been a little bit of an issue. So we walk all the way back, all the way to the other side of the seating. And we're like, oh my gosh, a gate that lets you onto the track that you walk across and then you can go to the garages. So we get up there and they're like, you have to have passes. You have to go pick them up. And we're like, you have to have passes and we go to pick them up.
We have to have the physical thing. And we're like, okay, so where do we go pick these passes
then we go all the way back out.
My phone would be enough.
And we go and we finally get the passes. And Lauren and I are really excited because usually I would say with NASCAR and IndyCar, the paddock passes are usually bracelets or like Lauren said, on your phone. But we had actual physical passes and we're like, oh my gosh, we can keep them for our memory boxes. Woo! So that was exciting.
We were finally those lanyard girls that
we have the lanyards.
That's one. We were those girls.
We wanted to be them so bad, and now we are them. So then we go and we walk across basically the track and then across the field and then into the paddock. And we get to meet up with the track talk girls, and we got to talk to them. We saw Zoe and Sarah and, got to see everyone and kind of talk and hang out and see all the teams. We saw the elusive Logie Bear out in the
Yes.
wild.
In the flesh. He is
in the flesh.
alive.
And honestly,
we
looking
wouldn't
very
have
happy.
recognized him. Yeah, he looked very happy. He was in a black t-shirt and shorts and like sunglasses and a hat, or no, just sunglasses. And if it wasn't for this girl like stopping him to take a picture and Caley noticing that,
I was a
don't
spotter
think we
for the
would have
weekend.
noticed that was Logan Sargent. Like I would have been like, that's just another blonde frat guy.
But yeah, so that was cool and fun. It was kind of fun, like, I guess, because they're all, at the end of the day, they're just regular people. Like, a lot more talent than I have for driving. But like, they're regular people, so it's kind of fun, like, people spotting and pointing them out and be like, oh my gosh, there's them, there's them, there's them. Like we saw Angela when we were going to go see the Indy Next paddock. As we
I
were
was
like
like
walking
way
out,
more excited for Angela than any of the IndyCar
and we were like, oh my gosh,
No, you saw
Angela!
Rossi.
And so then after that, when it started getting like closest to time, like they pulled all the cars out and like lined them up on track in their positions, and you could walk by and see all of them. So after all that, we went back to the other side when they were doing like the driver walkouts. And Lauren and I were like, we need sustenance. We need food and we need a Coke or something with sugar. So we go and get our food and then find our seats. Great seating. Thank you, McLaren. Buy one, get one free. Shout out. Pro tip, if you are going to Nashville next year, buy seats that are higher up because then you can see all of the oval. If you buy seats lower down, yes, you can like physically be close to the cars and see the action, but you only see the action for that spot. You can't see it around the whole track. So I would say probably anything from rows 30 up.
30 up, yeah.
Yeah. And then you're also in the shade most of the time, which is very, very nice.
Was ideal.
So definitely that. And then we actually timed it very perfectly. We went at about lap 30 or like 30 left and went and took the shuttle because after the race starts, I mean, clearly you cannot cross the track anymore with cars on it. Might be a little bit of a safety hazard. So at that point you have to take the shuttle through the car bridge over to the paddock. So we went about like 30 laps to go, went at that time and timed it perfectly. Lauren had not the replay. What am I trying to say?
I had the stream on Peacock.
Yeah, the
on
stream,
my phone.
thank you. On her phone. And it was to the point, it was so stressful. I was like, Lauren, I can't watch. I can't look at it. Like I was still clearly watching it because it's like a train wreck. You can't actually look away from the carnage. So I was having heart palpitations. Lauren felt my wrist at one point. She's like, your heart is actually pounding quite fast for this. I was like, I told you I was stressed. So we get out and we make our way over because a lot of people had done the same thing. And because the podium ceremony was happening like right outside of the paddock in, I guess, like a little designated area in front of the media center. So if you had paddock passes, you could go over and watch the podium ceremony in person. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I think the paddock passes were not that expensive relatively compared to other races. So Nashville would be another good place to buy paddock passes at if you are considering that. So we go there, we get our little spot on like these little kind of bleacher sets, and we ended up seeing
we had
Zoe.
A great spot.
Yeah, great spot, great pictures, great videos, all the works. Saw Zoe and Sierra again, chatted up with them, and kind of just hung out until the end. And then we timed it also well on the way out because we had waited so long and watched all of, like the ceremonies and trophy handouts and cap switches. We had like no traffic getting out of Lebanon, and we're just able to like book it out. So yeah, that's about it. Woo.
Yeah, so the more like on track side of Nashville. So this race was like technically the championship decider. It's between Pillow and Power, but unfortunately right at the beginning of the race, Will Power's seatbelt had gotten loose. And so he had to come in to get that fixed. And so that put him a couple laps down. And so he pretty early on knew that, okay, that was done for him and that it was Pelot's. But overall, I mean, the race was really good. I thought there was going to be a lot more like DNFs or like big come togethers than there was, because there often is at ovals. But there wasn't. I mean, there were only 3 DNFs and they were just like their own fault. They had like a little bit of a, lock up or whatever. And it was Felix Rosenquist, Ericsson, and then Catherine Legg all had just like little mistakes that just cost them their race, unfortunately. Kyle Kirkwood started from pole and he led the race for like the whole first stint. And then we had a whole bunch of different leader changes. I think Joseph was leading at one point, Pato was leading at one point, David was leading at the end. That's when Caley was going to vomit. Rossi was leading for a while.
It was just a stressful, like, I would say probably lap 55 down. I was just an anxious ball. And it was
when
partly
she saw
anxious.
that David had to dive into the pits, I thought she was going to pass
I was just
out.
like, why? Why? I was so frustrated. I was like, I understand. Like, circumstantially, the yellows did kind of throw a wrench in some of the people's strategy. Pato and Malukas, I think, were the leaders-wise were most affected. So that did cause them to kind of fall down in ranks when they had to repit for different things. So it was very, like, you get emotionally invested in these races. So at certain points, you're like, you are cheering for this person because it is a very tangible possibility that they could win. And then you're like, you have to pit again on the last lap. I told Lauren at one point when we were waiting because when Pelot came in for the championship win, in between him like receiving his trophy and his ring and all that, and then them doing the lineup for the actual race, we had like a 30-40 minute wait. And I was like, at that point, I would have just finished the race and taken the penalty. Like, as long as I crossed number 1 in my brain, that's all that matters. Like, give me the penalty after the fact for not making like my second, fourth, whatever pit stop. I don't care. But I want to cross in first, which is probably why I'm not a race car driver, among many other things. But I would have been like, it doesn't matter. I crossed first, so that's all that matters in my little brain.
I mean, I feel like that's what's so fun about IndyCar. With F1.
You
if
never
someone's
know
like,
what's gonna happen.
Right,
Yeah.
in IndyCar, someone miraculously could take the lead of the race and like actually win, whereas in F1 you're like, this person's in the lead and there's 3 laps left. They're pretty,
so
it's spicy.
It's really any man's game. But I was also stressed because I wanted us to get over there to the podium before like all the crowds went over there and before the race actually ended. So it was the stress of like relocating while also watching the race and cheering for people and being like, oh my gosh, who's gonna win? Who's gonna lose? Who's gonna win? So it was just a lot of stress. I'm sure if I had been wearing my Apple Watch, it would have either thought 1, I was working out, or 2, I was having a heart attack. Maybe both at the same time, but I'm clearly here today, so somehow I made it through and survived the ending of the IndyCar season.
Overall, I think it was a really good race. It was interesting because normally on a oval you just run the standard tires, but they were given alternates that they had to run in the race, and they had to run 2 sets during the race. So that made the strategy calls very interesting. So that kind of added an element to it. I don't really know why Firestone and IndyCar decided to do that, but whatever. It made it a little bit more interesting.
Listen to Off Track with Hinch and Rossi. Their most recent episode, they talk about how the drivers didn't know until like a week and a half before the race that they were gonna be doing this tire rotation, which was an interesting choice by Firestone. But I mean, what are you gonna say? I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, it was fun to be there for the season ender. So we got to see Pelot and Chip Ganassi get given the, big trophy, the Astor Cup or whatever it's called. So that was cool. And then just to see Pato on the podium, heard it on the podium. That was a fun podium to see, and them all celebrating, spraying their champagne. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed, and I will be there next year.
Yeah.
And so will Julia.
Same. Ditto.
I better be, or else I think we can collectively say that we're all a little bit sad that IndyCar season is over. And now we're just holding on to the last couple races in F1 as well. Crazy to think that we're already so far through racing season, and the pod's grown so much.
Mm-hmm.
Also a little excited to like maybe have a winter break where we're not waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning every day on a Sunday for race cars.
As much as we love it, and we were talking about this, I think some Sunday evening, where I might have admitted to everyone that I will only be the tiniest bit glad, and only for like the first week and a half, that I will have nothing to do with racing and I can just be a person outside of it. But then after like a week and a half, I will be sad again. Reality will unfortunately come back crashing down, and I'll be like, what am I supposed to do with all my free time?
But I guess the last little bit about Nashville is, I think honestly my favorite part. We went out. We weren't supposed to go out. We were supposed to go home on Sunday night. Everyone was like, we're going out. We're like, fine, so we'll stay. So we stayed another night with our friend, and we went out on Broadway, and the first people that we run into, like, we get onto Broadway and there's people sitting in front of us, is Marcus Armstrong. And I was like, it's just seeing people out in the wild versus like, okay, yeah, you see drivers at the track, but seeing him like in
civilian
my state
clothing
on Broadway, I was like, this is just weird.
And like,
Strange.
you don't expect them to be out in like their racing suit or anything, but like seeing them in like real people clothing is very jarring. I'm like,
Like,
this is like a
are you?
Twilight Zone episode. Oh, are you? Because it was just very they were just like standing on the side of the road, and we were walking down the road, like it is at the very beginning of Broadway, and I'm like, is that Marcus Armstrong? And Lauren is like, yeah, that is. And then we just keep walking by. We're like, okay, well, I guess where's Waldo?
Yes, we saw
But
them.
and so it was fun to like go out and see everyone. And this was a game time decision that Lauren and I made quite literally right after the podium ceremony in the bathrooms before getting back on the shuttle. We were like, do we say, would that be crazy of us? Should I take a half day and just say, you only live once, let's just go out? And we did. And it was everything we could have wanted and more.
Great end to the weekend.
Well, even though I have the most severe FOMO from not being in Nashville this weekend, lucky enough, I was able to catch the Grand Prix in Azerbaijan for F1. So this week we were racing in Baku, and like I woke up late and then put on qualifying, and because Lauren had texted and I was like, don't tell me anything, I haven't seen it yet, like I need to know. And then qualifying was not what I expected in the slightest, and I feel like it kind of set us up for the race that we had this weekend, where I think all of us walked away being like, this was a good racing weekend, super interesting. Big shock after the season that he's had. Lando was out in Q1, so he qualified P17 and then ended up starting P15 after Gasly's qualifying disqualification. I think something to do with like the fuel, whatever, wasn't right. And then we also had Lewis and Esteban Ocon having to start from the pit lane due to changes made to the car. Even though he qualified pretty low, at least he got a 2-place bump to kind of help him out a little bit come race day.
Whoop whoop, Charles on pole. And he has been on pole. Unfortunately, not one. The streak has continued, but has been on pole every year since 2021. The last set of winners, it was Checo, Max, Checo, and now Oscar. Poor man cannot catch a break. But Oscar started P2, Carlos P3, with the Red Bulls in P4, Checo, and P6, Max. And I'm not going to lie, this race had many twists and turns. One being, could this have been Checo's redemption? Is this a bridge unto greater things for Checo? Words I never thought I would hear come out of my mouth, but are nonetheless true.
Williams kind of ate this weekend, not gonna lie. They both got into Q3, and besides Mr. Albon's mechanics team leaving his airbox fan in his car, that was, how do you do that? Are you stupid? Like,
especially
I
it's a
because
saw the
huge,
video.
yeah,
it's a huge piece of equipment.
He
Like,
almost got run over trying to like pull it out, but like
yeah,
that should have been out 30 seconds earlier. There's just like not a good excuse.
that was wild to me.
also doesn't it have like
Um,
parts that are lime green on it? Like how do
It's
you
like
yeah,
fluorescent.
it's like that, the whatever that brand, like the Roby stuff that's all neon green.
it's not like it's camouflage and it's easily missed. Like it is quite
It sticks out because
bright.
it's not supposed to
Yeah.
be there.
Right, bright enough that
Um,
Oscar immediately was like, Alex's Airbox fan is still in on the radios.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
I was like, what? And then it pans to him, and I'm like, oh,
Ooh.
ew. Yeah. So the Williams were doing great. I mean, Franco Colapinto was up to P5 at one point. Alex was like way up there in like Q1 or Q2 or something, but they ended qualifying P9 and P10, but then were later bumped up to P8 and P9 because of other people's penalties. I think it was Lewis's penalty that bumped them up. So Franco not only did he get into Q3, but out qualified Alex. So that was kind of wild. So like great job to both the Williams guys, but especially to Franco. That's very, very impressive. So Mr. Ollie Behrman out qualified Hulkenberg. So he qualified 11th and Hulk qualified 13th. But then again, with people's penalties, Ollie ended up starting 10th. So an amazing weekend for our mid-season rookies. They did great, and they both matched the pace of their teammates the entire weekend. So props to them.
Moving on to Sunday race day. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning to make sure that I had myself collected to start watching at 7 before I had to pick up my U-Haul and literally pack up my entire apartment in no time at all. I had a feeling that I wasn't sure if you guys were up yet or not, but I sent a text message. I was like, no spoilers. And I was like, guys, what a race. And just like
Lauren and
left it
I
at that.
immediately turned on
I
the
literally
race.
opened my laptop when I saw your, like, I woke up at 8 and I was gonna go back to bed, and then I saw Julia's text and I was like, literally pulled open my laptop. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I then
F1.
cracked
'cause-
my eyes open and it was like, what are you doing? And she was like, the race.
Lauren texted me
You're like,
back.
"Okay, I'm awake."
She's like, no spoilers. I deleted Instagram off of my phone, like, because which is great. And I need to start doing that if I'm not going to be able to watch like the race or qualifying like exactly as it's happening. I need to delete all social media because I hate logging on. And then like the first thing on my feed is a spoiler for everything that happened.
Yeah.
Personally, I love that. I love spoiling stuff
It's your
for me.
entire life.
I don't really enjoy surprises. So unless it's birthdays, I love to be surprised on birthdays. And
But like
I
to me,
guess
if I know the score of a game, I know the outcome of a race, like I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah.
I'll
Like
still
I'm
go
like,
back and
oh,
watch it for the
UT
podcast.
won.
But I love the spoilers. I love it. Takes all the stress and anxiety of the unknown and just gives it to me. And then I'm like, okay, now I have nothing to worry about because I know the outcome. So it's all good. Looking at the race, watching the race, really feeling the race. It feels like racing is back. I'm not going to lie. It was very exciting, especially when we were getting down to sort of the nitty gritty very end. This whole day was just stress around racing for me. Excited stress, but stress around racing. It was basically, at one point, a 4-way battle for the win. And then it was really kind of crazy that between Oscar and Charles, most of it happened within a second or less of them racing together. So really, really good racing. Great moves made by people. I think someone even made a comment at one point that said that, referring to Charles and Oscar, that this was a battle between two future world champions. So props to everyone who top 4, Checo, Carlos, Oscar, Charles, great racing. I'm sending all of my compliments to you guys. Thumbs up approval.
I mean, top 4
Well,
during most of the race.
top 4, and then you just add, it's what like that
My
thing on
true
TikTok.
top 4, not the actual top 4.
It's like
My
the top four
emotional
in my
top
heart.
4.
and we just closed the laptop. So at top 4, and then you just cut it off before chaos breaks loose.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned, Charles on pole. He's been on pole at Baku since 2021. Man's is cursed. He had the Monaco curse. He just keeps adding them on. He held the lead for a really good stint of the race, but eventually is overtaken by Oscar, and then spent pretty much the entire rest of the race chomping on Oscar's heels. Like we said, kind of within a second of him that whole time, and he kept making attempts, but never had a real opportunity to get, an overtake done and regain the lead. So turning to Oscar, huge props to this kid, man, he's a man in my eyes. His racing IQ, and we've talked about racing IQ before, league above. He's so calm and just calculated in that car. Very well-deserved result. I think this is a huge relief too, after everything that went down with his first win. To get a second win in this season really goes to show that this is a driver you should not see one way. You should not just see him, as a second driver. He did win driver of the day. We've been talking about papaya rules since last race, and I think this just further proves the point that something like papaya rules or putting in team orders that Oscar's job is just to help Lando is a absolutely silly idea, because now you have two drivers on your team who have both won 2 races. Neither of them is better than the other.
Yes, Caley.
I have a comment. So upon further reflection, from comments I may have alluded to last week, in regards to the
Caley
papaya
literally
rule,
was screaming while we were watching this. She goes, I wish I hadn't said those things in our podcast last week.
I take back everything that I may or may not have alluded to. Lando can suck on my big toe. I'm all for Oscar. You take it. You win it. You go for it.
I'm
That's all
dead.
I have to say.
Caley's now Oscar's biggest fan after this weekend.
Good.
Yeah.
She
And I wasn't-
switched sides and committed hard.
I never wasn't an Oscar fan. I never particularly cared for Lando. But I have had some time to reflect on words that I have said. And I realized I was wrong. I can be a big enough person to admit when I was wrong. And I was. So, Oscar, I ride for you now.
Didn't
And-
take much.
It didn't take much. Guys, it really did not take much. So yeah, that's my thoughts and feelings.
So another thing that I never thought I'd be saying on here is I was so impressed with Checo. I was actively cheering for him to win at the end. I was like, just overtake them all. You can win. No, mainly
I
because
was sitting next to her
really,
and I was like, this is an invasion of the body snatchers. I have no idea who this person is.
Well, it was just for the fact that if Checo wins a race, and we have 8 race winners in the season, and I really just want it for that statistic. I need there to be an 8th race winner, and he's the most likely person to do that. And so I'm like, can you please just win? But I was excited that he was gonna be on the podium, because I was like, okay, he had this form at the beginning, and it's back. And I think it's because we were racing in a country that had limited human rights, and so that's suddenly when Checo's time to shine. And combining with the street track, he really was just in his element. So he outqualified Max. He was on a doing better in the race than Max, because he got up to 3rd place and was holding his position, and was ended up catching up. The top 4 were bunched up at the end, all fighting for 4 positions, and that's what ultimately ended in the Carlos Checo takedown. But I was very impressed with Checo, and I was actively rooting for him. Whenever there's someone that's not supposed to be up there, I'm I will be cheering for you, unless it's Ocon or George. Those are my 2 exceptions. Anyone else, I'll be you get it. So yeah, so we were all really Caley and I were so hyped up watching the end of this race, and who's gonna get on the podium, who's gonna get that 3rd podium spot, because at one point it looked, before the crash, I was because Charles's tires were falling off, I'm could Checo and Carlos go through and Charles lose this podium spot? I was because that would, I wanted obviously Charles on the podium, but I'm anything that makes racing interesting, I'm if that happened, it could be sad for Charles, but I would be excited because of the result. So yeah, so Carlos took him and Checo out. I haven't had a lot of time to review and figure out exactly how it happened, but just from watching the race and the replay, it looked like it was Carlos's fault.
They deemed it neither of their faults, because, or equal fault basically, or a racing incident,
racing
Carlos was
incident.
on a racing line, and for some reason his car, like neither driver moved their wheels at all,
Yeah,
and
because Carlos
Carlos's car
seems
just
like
went,
confused.
yeah, he's like, what
Yeah,
happened? And
it's
then they
almost like
did
his
all,
car just decided to
And I will say
I
I
don't know, the wind
do
blew it into him.
literally, because it
the
was just
ground
like all of a
shifted.
sudden it went dong, and I was like, what happened there?
Guys, it was the tectonic plates. It was just too powerful of a racing setup, and it was like something's got to change.
It was George Russell
Oh,
casting spells
yes,
in
witchcraft.
P5,
But
literally.
I think they said too that like relatively equal fault, Carlos's fault because the car came off the racing line slightly, but also that Checo could have avoided it and given more space. Either way, I was standing in the train station like finding my brother and just like gasped so loud in public when that happened because I was like, Why? Especially too because when you watch it, they're good, and then all of a
And then
sudden,
all of a sudden,
wall.
yeah,
It's
I know.
not.
Kaylee
Lauren and
and
I
I literally like
rewatched it like
jaw
twice.
dropped. We were like, we literally rewinded it and rewinded it and rewind it because we're
We were
like,
like,
I
this
think
is
what?
that
insane.
might be the best crash of the season.
And our then immediate reaction after that was, oh no, that means George gets P3.
Yeah. It was
And
a very
I
disheartening
overall
discovery.
that was the most upsetting part of it all, was that.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of a bummer that the race had to end in a virtual safety car, but I mean, I think it was clear that Oscar, I mean, he at that point he had taken there was a gap and no one was going to catch him. The race was really for like second and third. Overall it was a really great race. One of my favorites of the year for sure, and I hope the rest of the season keeps trending the way it has been recently.
On to a bit of happier news. Williams double points this race, which is a phenomenal turnout, especially with sort of, a new driver in the seat, a rookie, no less, who has had virtually no time in F2, catapulted into F1. So, very good job from both rookies, Ollie Behrman in Haas and Colapinto in Williams. So, the Williams drivers both into Q3, Franco in P9, Alex in P10, and then race stack up wise, Alex in P7 and Franco in P8. So it was a points overload for them this race. And then Ollie Behrman scoring points in a Haas. Great qualifying, great race performance. All around sprinkle. Great race for the rookies. And a little props to Ollie. He is the only driver to score points for two teams in the same season. A little callback to when he was a reserve driver. There we go. For Ferrari when Carlos had his appendix out.
I hate to admit that Franco Colapinto is doing a good job because I'm still upset about Logan, but
No, it's a tough
Franco
pill to swallow.
Colapinto, you are doing a good job, and
He's
I'm
got
happy
just
for you.
such
James
spunk to him.
Vowles, still mad at you though. Still mad at that man. Um, Double thumbs down for James. Lando, so we know he had a pretty rough qualified P17, but got to start P15 after all of those penalties. This man finished P4 after Carlos and Checo DNF'd themselves by whatever magical forces they were partaking in. That's nuts. That's a great way to make up places. And I think it does show, like, we know Lando's a good driver, but to me, that's like watching some Max level stuff. Like, Max could start P20 and end on a podium, and Lando's kind of showing that he has the makeup to do that. If he can get his headspace right and up his racing IQ, right now he's the thing holding himself back. Speaking of Lando, McLaren, and our constructors ship, as we like to call it in this house.
Mm-hmm.
If you are not aware, we've just shortened constructors championship to constructorship because it's easier.
It's the only logical thing to do.
For the first time since 2014, McLaren are leading the constructors championship. And Red Bull, like, we've been saying it for weeks now, you guys are slipping. Max started in P6 and finished P5, so he made up 1 place for the entire race, even after his own teammate and another driver DNF'd. And Lando finished P4 ahead of him after starting in P15. Did see an article today that kind of hinted or suggested that Red Bull are kind of admitting that they should have taken Checo's feedback earlier on in the season more seriously, that the car has way more problems than they thought it did.
Yep. Wow,
Food for
Red Bull
thought.
admitting that they were wrong. Checo has been saying the car is effed, and Toto had it printed out, and he was right. He was right. So the other little dramas that we had after the race was because the race ended on a virtual safety car. I feel like that doesn't really happen very often. Often, like, yeah, maybe under a yellow flag, like a regular yellow flag, but like the virtual safety car, I think just kind of threw everyone off. And so during the cool down lap, a bunch of people were overtaking each other, which technically, since it's a virtual safety car, you're not supposed to overtake anyone, but because it normally in a cool down lap after the race, it doesn't matter and you can overtake people. And so there was all these like little FIA notations of like people overtaking during the virtual safety car, but nothing came of it. But yeah, people were snitching on each other after the race. Lando was snitching on Max.
So now that the race is like fully over, I saw a little bit about this today and I watched a couple like videos and looked at it. No one wants to see McLaren doing well. We know that Red Bull's probably pissed that they just took the lead in the constructors championship. The minute someone starts to do really well in a car, all of the other teams have to figure out and say, you know what, they must be cheating. And there is potentially going to be an investigation on McLaren's rear wing spec that was used in Baku, because it did look like it had some extra flex in it that kind of created the way that the wing, flexes normally. It created almost like a little bit of a gap, i.e. letting more airflow and potentially acting as like a miniature DRS. So nothing has come of that yet, but something does. And if there's like penalties given to Oscar and Lando, I think I might actually like riot. Like you'll find me at the FIA headquarters, like with a torch and axe or something, because like you can't take that one away from him. That would be so unfair. And that's where we're at F1 wise. Looking forward to
That's all,
Singapore.
folks.
I
Yeah.
love Singapore because 1, it's a night race, and 2, it's another street track. I think, Lauren, I think you and I have both agreed it's one of our favorite tracks of the season.
I always love Singapore. That's like really high up on my bucket list of a race that I want to attend in person. Just like the visuals, like visual wise on TV, I think Vegas and Singapore are like just so cool with like the lights and it being dark. And so this year I get to check Vegas off the list, but Singapore that would be a race I would absolutely, I mean, I would love to visit Singapore in general, but to go and see a race and then like visit Singapore, like I'm like dying to go there.
Their bonus is it means that we're getting ice bath content this week.
Oh, true.
This and Qatar.
Yeah, and what's exciting is now all Europe races are done, so we don't have to get up at the butt crack of dawn to watch races. Most of them are now going to be in our general time zones. So that is exciting.
Super early races, which is nice.
Yeah.
And then a shocking turn of events. We had no it corner. Not a single one. We had the most positive feelings, but nothing that would qualify anyone to actually be in the it corner. So everyone skated by on thin ice, but they still
nobody had any particular actions that incentivized an ick. We can't give someone an ick just for their like sense of being. That wouldn't be fair.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is their personality, and they can't change that.
But we do have some brats for our brat corner, and bringing in number 1 spot might be one of my favorite people to exist now is Mr. Will Power. Every week I just like Will Power more and more and more. You would think that after losing the championship fight that she'd be sad and want to go home. But no, Mr. Willpower was out on Broadway at Tootsie's playing the drums. Literally playing the drums all night long at the bar. And we knew that was the bar that he was at, and that was my one regret, is that we didn't go there. We
I
should have
don't know
stopped
why
by.
we didn't. For
Yeah,
some reason, it just like skipped over our brain.
it was
And
the
if you
Marcus
don't
Ericsson
believe us,
Armstrong of it all.
Our other brat this week is Mr. Mark Webber himself. If you don't know, Mark Webber is actually Oscar Piastri's manager. In recent times with everyone talking papaya rules, Oscar should be the second driver, da-da-da-da-da. Mark Webber turned around and said, "You don't talk about my son like that." And apparently this week in the paddock, after Oscar won, so he was like, "Oscar the second driver, Oscar doesn't know how to manage his tires, to like all of the paddock people and the like news media. And I just think that that's iconic. And Oscar's a man of few words, so Mark Webber was like, "I got you, buddy, don't worry about it."
Mark Webber was
Literally.
feeling very feisty this weekend, as he should, as
He
he
was
is
like,
entitled to.
better not talk about my son that way. Like, literally going up to people unprompted, like reporters. Apparently went up to Laura
Yes.
Winters and was like, who didn't manage his tires well this time? Not my son, not Oski. Like, I can just imagine him doing it too in his like aggressively thick Australian accent.
He is the
Mark
pageant
Webber.
mom to end all pageant moms.
He quite literally is.
God, wait, I just thought of a third brat, and it's F1 adjacent. It's Oscar Piastri, still related. Oscar's sister
Yes,
I love
her
her
TikTok.
content.
posted
I
a
live.
TikTok doing a cover of
Of Lacey.
Lacey by Olivia Rodrigo, and everyone in the comments was like, not the fact that this is literally the song that people make edits of your brother and Logan Sargent to. And then she
Yep.
responded to it and was like, "I literally never would not have done that if I had known. I just thought that song sounds good with my voice." So
What if people start using
We
her
love.
cover of Lacey to make edits about
I'm sure it's happened. I'm
Logan
sure they're already
Sargent.
doing it.
Not.
no, that feels so wrong. So many levels.
Because she knows she has to know Logan Sargent.
Of course.
So it's so much more bittersweet. It hits even closer to home.
Right. This is an edit of you singing about people shipping your brother with Logan Sargent. It's weird. Sometimes F1 internet takes it too far.
Good night. Goodbye. We love you, lovely people. And to take note from the Truman Show, in case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night.